What's up? What's up? What's up? Y'all ready? Let's do this thing. This is going to be exposing the Prowler. Exposing the Prowler. 1 Peter 5:8 says, "Be sober-minded, be watchful. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour." So what does it mean to prowl? And what does it mean for the enemy to be a prowler? Well, if we look at the definition here of prowl, it means to walk, to make one's way. But I like this piece here: make due use of make due use of opportunities. How many of you know that enemy loves to make use of every opportunity to get at a successful, influential, obedient believer? He's going to use every opportunity. It's Hebrew for live. Okay, it says to regulate, to conduct oneself, to pass one's life. So surface level, pretty simple. Just making one's way, making use of all opportunities, prowling around, right? The reason we should remain sober-minded is because the enemy is always making due use of every opportunity that he has. The first root to this word for prowl, we're going to break it down kind of like we've broken down some other words, but we're going to break this down. Root number one means to tread. To tread. Now, this one's interesting because does it not say that we will tread on serpents, scorpions? Yet the enemy here, the prowler, that word prowl comes from a root that means to tread. Like he's going to be treading, right? To crush with the feet. To advance by setting foot upon. To encounter successfully the greatest perils from the machinations, that is tactics. Those are called, I don't even know if I'm saying it right, machinations. But this is copied over. I looked it up. It means wiles, looks like a plan, like devices of the enemy. You've heard all those words before. To encounter successfully the greatest perils. So encountering perils from the machinations and persecutions which Satan would fain thwart the preaching of the gospel. We're going to talk about what that actually means in plain English here in a little bit. C is to tread underfoot. Treat with an insult or contempt and desecrate the holy city by devastation and outrage. We're going to talk a little bit more about that too. But just to take it a little deeper, surface level, it's prowling. It's doing nothing. It's just kind of roaming around there. Not real sure what he's up to. But the first root is he's up to some stuff, right? He's trying to crush. He's trying to do some things. The second root, if you take it back another root, is paio. P-A-I-O. Pronounced paio. Means to strike or sting. Wow, that's interesting because, again, I thought that the word said that we would be the ones tramping our feet and treading on serpents and scorpions. Are serpents not what strike? Are scorpions not what sting? Yet the second root to this word for prowling like a lion means to strike or sting, to cause wound with a strike or a sting, like a snake or like a scorpion. Now, Luke 10:19, behold, I've given you authority to tread on serpents and scorpions and over all the power of the enemy, and nothing shall hurt you. So this root here has some interesting connotation. It's used to describe actually a smaller strike, sting, or smiting that deals less of a blow than a hard fatal blow. And we know that the enemy does this, right? Like, there's a difference between when the enemy strikes a big blow, multi-$100,000 blow, something like that. There's also these little stings, little strikes, little smitings that happen. And think about a lion who's prowling around. He's not really pouncing. It doesn't say that he pounces on people. It says he prowls around, making small jeers and insults and things that act as small strikes, small stings, small smiting, dealing less of a blow than what a hard, fatal blow might be. So these little, less violent. However, the next root, the root to that root, is the full blow. To strike, to beat. It's pronounced toop-toe, but it looks like tiptoe. Interestingly enough, while the enemy is prowling around, tiptoeing around, he's toop-toeing with a staff to whip somebody, to hit somebody with a staff. It's the fist, it's the hand. Look at this B right here. Of mourners to smite their breast. To smite one whom he afflicts punitive evil, which is exceeding amount of evil. And then to smite, and of course, metaphorically, to disquiet one's conscience. Disquiet means to stir up severe anxiety. We're going to break all this down. So I just wanted to look at these roots real quick. So right from the top, we've got prowling. The enemy, he's prowling around like a lion. To prowl is to make one's way, making use of opportunities. First root being to tread, to trample, crush with the feet, to bring some wiles, some devices against the church, and to thwart the preaching of the gospel. And then again, to desecrate the holy city by devastation and outrage, with insult and with contempt, trampling. Second root, to strike or sting, and this one is a smaller blow, but one more root will undo the other one, which is the tiptoe word, which is also to strike, to hit, but this one is a hard blow, one that is more of a full blow, like you get punched in the face by somebody who can knock you out in one hit kind of blow. These are all words that have to do with the word prowl. They're all inside the word prowl. Find that interesting. Okay, so let's get this straight. The full manifestation of the prowl is just to walk around, to conduct oneself. And that's what most Christians see. There's this idea that Satan is super secretive and can't be figured out, that he's always up to something, but nobody really knows what he's up to. Oh, brother, the enemy's up to this, the enemy's up to that. You don't really know. You're just saying it must be the enemy. But why is it that when talk about what Satan's actually up to comes up, it's this super secretive thing that can't really be figured out? And then, of course, there are believers who think that, well, you don't really want to mess with the enemy. If you mess with him, you could get sick, you could get cursed, you could die. If you try to dig too deep into what the enemy's doing in your life, you'll fall into wretched thinking, maybe even become a witch. You'll get so distracted by evil. Or, thirdly, if you figure out what he's up to, he'll send every host of his warfare, his side of the war, against you and your family, and you're going to have to deal with that. You're going to have to face that. I've heard, actually, all of these things spoken about amongst believers. I've seen believers want to run, when the enemy's working. Why? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me why that would happen. So, let's move on. I think that's stupid. What do I think stupid? Thinking that if you mess with the enemy, you'll get sick, cursed, and die. If you dig too deep, you'll fall into double-mindedness, wrong thinking. You might even become a witch or a warlock or something crazy. Or if you figure out what he's up to, he'll send every host of his warfare against you and your family. So people just try to stay away from understanding what the enemy's up to because they don't want that in their life. I think that's stupid. I think it's so stupid that I made a whole slide that says, boo, that's stupid. If those types of reasons are why you haven't figured out the warfare you're facing, then you're under the power of his false influence and you're acting like a coward. If the reason you don't want to understand what the enemy's doing is because you're afraid of what might happen if you figure it out, that's being a coward. It's you're already under the influence of his prowling. See, prowling is a facade. It's Satan puts on, it's nothing more than a mask to prowl. It's time for you to stop thinking his plans are too complicated for you to thwart. He wants to thwart the preaching of the gospel. I think we should thwart his influence. We know what he's doing. The works of the enemy have already been fully exposed, and we've already been fully empowered. I could stop this teaching right now and be done with it, because the works of the enemy have been fully exposed, and we have already been fully empowered. It's time to figure out what he's up to and fix the problems. Although the full manifestation may seem like, well, the enemy's just prowling around. Nobody's real sure what he's doing. That isn't what's happening. It's the mask. Does he prowl? Sure, he does prowl. And his prowl is his mask. His prowl is the diversion. What's really happening? It's not devouring, because he can't. It says he prowls around seeking someone to devour, but it doesn't say that he ever gets to devour anything. He prowls, seeking. He doesn't touch. And that's interesting to me. I think the reason he prowls around like a lion, seeking whom he can devour, is because he can't find anybody that God doesn't love. And he's too afraid to face the greater lion, the lion of the tribe of Judah. So the enemy's out here seeking who he can devour, because he can't find anybody to devour. He's got to keep seeking. Everyone he tries to go to devour, God is standing there loving on this person, whether they're a believer, unbeliever, whatever. The enemy is fearful of the Lord's love. He doesn't strike people. He doesn't pounce. The attacks of the enemy in your life are during the prowling, not during the pouncing. In fact, he's able to influence more Christians with a prowl than he is with a pounce. He's not devouring. He's prowling. He gets so much done just in prowling because nobody's sure what he's up to. Is he going to strike? Is he not going to strike? The enemy just keeps people on their toes because he's prowling around them like a lion. During the prowl, and we looked at this earlier, one of the definitions to one of our root words said the mourners would smite their breast like I'm mad, like a gorilla. But really, like you're weeping, you're mad, you're like, why? And so you're like hitting yourself in the chest. See, during the prowl, the enemy just wants to remind you of what's been taken. Whether that be the loss of a person, the loss of a job, the loss of something. The enemy wants to remind you of what's been lost. Maybe even create something that he thinks is lost, but it's not really lost. The enemy would love to do that, to create some facade, some false thing, or just to get you so distraught and discouraged because of what you don't have that you become a mourner in season to season, just beating yourself up at what you lost, reminding you of what's been taken. That happens during the prowl. Second thing that happens during the prowl is he inflicts evil. Smite one, to hit one who he inflicts punitive evil. So punitive evil is saying like an extra amount of evil. What believers end up doing is actually comparing their warfare or their peace to somebody else's. Well, I've faced some trials in my life. I don't think so-and-so's ever faced a trial that hard. Or I don't think this person ever did that. Or why do they get to steward that? They never went through the crushing that I went through, right? All those different things. When we begin comparing our war and our peace, it'll just cause contention in our heart between people. And this is something the enemy loves to do when he gets on the prowl. He wants us to begin to compare how much warfare we're facing versus other people, how much peace we have versus what other people have. If we begin comparing our war and our peace between everyone who we see, maybe people we follow, maybe people we know, maybe people we don't know. Once we start comparing our lifestyle and our life and what we've had to go through or what we've gained to what other people have gone through or what they've gained, then the enemy is winning. The prowl is working. He doesn't even have to pounce. We get so focused on ourselves that we miss the key that God wants us focused on him. And thirdly, the metaphor to wound or to disquiet one's conscience. It may say wound, but I'm saying wound, like you wind something up, because that's what anxiety is. It's like it's a winding, like you're cranking something up. Or like an old, I used to have a BB gun that the more I would pump it, the faster that bullet would go, the more air it would compress. So I would pump this thing up as much as I could to get a good shot. Well, that's like winding it up, disquieting one's conscience. What that means is that the enemy, in the midst of a prowl, is trying to create conversation that leads to fearful, worrisome, and anxious heart palpitations that lead to confused, conscious thought. In other words, while he's prowling, he's threatening. When a lion is prowling around some kind of other animal, some kind of prey, the thing doesn't know, when is this thing going to jump out at me? When's it going to attack me? When am I going to have to face this thing? At some point, it's going to jump. At some point, it's going to try and bite me, try to swipe me, whatever. Maybe it has friends around. What am I going to do? I can't run. If I turn my back on it, it'll attack. So it creates this internal dialogue, this internal conversation when the enemy is present. He'll let his presence be known because he's a prowler. And it's going to cause people sometimes to create an internal conversation of fear, worry, and anxiety. And their heart, which is the mixture between the spirit and the soul, begins to palpitate, begins to jump one way, jump the other way, start to feel things, start to get pulled in different spiritual directions. And this leads to confused conscious thinking. Now, all this stuff is just happening in the midst of the prowl, while he's prowling. So as you can see, the prowl can get a lot of things done. The enemy doesn't really ever have to pounce if he can just keep believers shooting themselves in the foot, keep believers so distracted from God because they're focused on the prowl that they miss an opportunity to steward something great. As the prowling causes those results in the hearts and minds of people, he also treads, which we looked at was to trample, to crush with the feet, to advance by setting foot upon, to tread upon, to encounter successfully with the greatest perils and machinations and persecutions with which Satan would fain thwart the preaching of the gospel. Here's what that means. It means devils will follow you wherever you go, reminding you of the trouble you can't run from, so that you get so overwhelmed with increasing warfare until your voice, your message, and your perspectives become disdained and weakened by you. Not by the enemy, but by you. See, the enemy, he only has words. That's what he uses. So the way that the enemy tramples on you, crushes you, is by causing you to crush yourself. It's to encounter you with devices and wiles and things that'll confuse you and things that'll distract you until you thwart your own preaching of the gospel because you've become so overwhelmed with the trouble he reminds you of. With these things, with being reminded of what was taken, comparing your warfare and your peace to other people, creating those conversations of anxiety in your heart. When that happens, you lose your voice, you lose your message, you lose your perspectives. Not in the sense that they're gone, but in the sense that they're being changed, disdained, polluted, weakened by you. See, the enemy doesn't have to pounce. All he has to do is prowl. As the prowling causes those results in the hearts and minds of people, he also treads. To tread underfoot, to trample on, And here's this: to treat with insult and contempt, to desecrate the holy city by devastation and outrage. Here's what I believe that means. I believe it means that devils will do their best to treat people of entire regions with insult and contempt until the righteousness of regions becomes ravaged by the outrageous and consistent failed attempts to love and receive love. See, sin can look like a lot of things, but all sin really is the fruit of unreceived and unlived out love from the Father. Sin is the fruit of an unreceived and unlived out love from the Father. If you want to see yourself walk outside of sin, if you want sin to no longer be a problem in your life, then receive his love and live it out. That's it. That's all it takes. So devils will do their best to treat people of entire regions with insult and contempt until the righteousness of regions becomes ravaged, raped, molested by outrageous and consistent failed attempts to love and failed attempts to receive love. See, if people stay in religion, if people stay stuck on the works perspective, this is what it'll look like. It'll look like sin. Did you know it's a sin to even go for works? To get your validity off of what you do is a sin. Because then you begin to love what you do instead of receiving what he's already done and living that out with power. This is how he treads. It's how he consecrates the holy city. See, Revelation says that we're the holy city. At some point, we'll need no sun because he will be our light and we'll be in the city. We will be the city. It's a very interesting perspective. So the big thing is, how are you receiving the love of God and living it out? Or do you think that maybe you are rejecting some of this love and that's why it's not being lived out? The truth is, Satan and other devils don't really do anything new. They hate Jesus. They hate the church. That's what they do. 1 Peter 5, 9 through 11, which is the next verse after the prowling verse, right? So be sober minded. Your enemy prowls around like a lion, seeking whom he may devour. Next verse. Resist him, firm in your faith, knowing that the same kinds of suffering are being experienced by your brotherhood throughout the world. The same kind. So the idea that what you're experiencing from the enemy is any different than what anyone else is experiencing from the enemy is a lie. It's false. It's false, false, false. Resist him. Be firm in your faith, knowing that the same kinds of suffering are being experienced by your brotherhood throughout the world. And after you've suffered a little while, the God of all grace, who's called you to his eternal glory in Christ, will himself restore, confirm, strengthen, and establish you. And to him be dominion forever and ever. Amen. He talks about dominion here. So across the world, everywhere, Satan's doing the same thing. The devils that are on his team are doing the same thing. They hate Jesus. They hate the gospel. They hate the church. They're prowling. Prowling. Not even pouncing, just prowling. They won't worship. This is what Satan wants. Even he took Jesus, said, hey, Jesus, worship me and I'll give you this stuff. I'll give you all the kingdoms of the world in their glory. Worship me. So what they do is they act as gods. You know, other cultures that worship false gods, all they're worshiping is fallen angels. The influence of prowlers. Prowlers want worship. They want attention. They want time, attention, and focus. God wants time, attention, and focus. Which one do you want to give it to? You can give your time, attention, and focus to God, or you can give it to the thing that's prowling around you. Therefore, Jesus said again, truly I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. All who've come before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep have not listened to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. They'll come in and they'll go out and find pasture. Now, what this is talking about is the sheepfold. It's a big pen, put sheep in. It's got a fence all the way around, and then the door is not there. It's like a fence gate with no gate. It's just a little opening. So the sheep go in, and then the shepherd, who is the gate, will lay across the opening where the gate would be. And the only way anything can come in or go out would be that they have to go through the gate, which is actually the person. It's whatever shepherd is keeping all the sheep in the sheepfold that night. So thieves and robbers are the ones who came before Jesus. But the sheep didn't listen to them. Why? Because John 10:27, my sheep hear me, I know them, they follow me. His sheep hear his voice. They'll come in and they'll go out, they'll find pasture. Verse 10, the thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. So this concept that the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy isn't just saying, hey, Satan came to kill, steal, and destroy. No, it's saying the thief. The thief is the false god. It's the prowler that's being worshipped and is pretending to be a good gate, to be a good shepherd, but isn't. I would venture to say that many Christians and unbelievers, obviously, but even many Christians are worshiping a thief and they don't even know it. And the thief is the one who comes in pretending to be a good shepherd, pretending to be a good gate, and the sheep are led astray. So they steal the sheep from the Lord. They kill, they destroy, and they're going to use people to do those things. I've come that they may have life and have it to the full. That's what Jesus said. Jesus says, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his own life for the sheep. And this is interesting. The hired hand is not the shepherd and does not own the sheep. So who's the prowler? The prowler is this hired hand. The hired hand is not the shepherd and does not own the sheep. So when he sees the wolf coming, he abandons the sheep and runs away. Then the wolf attacks the flock and it scatters it. The man runs away because he's a hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. The devil is just a hired hand. The prowler is just a hired hand, hired by man to reveal lies about God. Adam and Eve hired him when they accepted his offer. See, Satan made an offer. It was a sales pitch. It was a sneaky sales pitch. And Eve bought it. Adam and Eve both bought it. And when they bought it, they signed a contract. They hired a man to reveal lies about God. They hired this hired hand. And the more we pay him our attention, the more he'll pretend to shepherd us. Guaranteed. Until the wolves show up. Until the real shepherd shows up. So here's my exhortation to you and to anyone else that you would be teaching or training on this topic. Let's stop letting the enemy lead our hearts when our hearts were meant to be led by the love of God. The enemy doesn't direct our steps unless we fear him more than we fear God. The hired hand, the liar, the prowler, would love to lead your heart, would love to direct your steps. The only thing that's going to give him the ability to do it is when you give him more attention, more time, more focus than you do God. He's just prowling, trying to distract you. Why does he prowl? Why does he tread? Because the more he moves, the more he insults, the more he threatens, the more you stay distracted, and your distraction is his success against you. If you can be distracted, the enemy succeeds against your sober judgment and your sound mind. That's what he's after. The purpose of the prowl is to mess up your sober judgment and to mess up your sound mind. To have sober judgment is to have a purity in administering God's form of justice to people in an environment of injustice. just like God gave you his form of justice, Jesus, in an environment of injustice, which is the world. Because Satan is a legalist in need of an authoritative witness in court, he seeks to disrupt sober judgment among the brethren in order to create opportunities to join in song, to join in words with the accusations of believers against one another. Well, the enemy must be working in that brother's life if he is whatever. Gossiping. The voice of the accuser joins in. Yeah. Look at that. Look at that brother, what he's doing. Come on, let's take that to court. Let's go testify. Sober judgment is the ability to see yourself on an equal playing field with other leaders, with other followers, in a way that's mature, in a way that is good. We've got to look at the justice of God from the perspective that Christ is the only one who's perfect. Sure, he made us perfect and is making us perfect. But if we were to compare ourselves, even, okay, I'm this perfect believer. Look at this person over here, how they are not. Then it's just the whole speck in their eye, plank in your own eye scenario. To accuse, compare, and measure the lives of others against your own is to fail to remember that you also are continually being saved from failure. Christ gave you his own identity so that you would have an opportunity to compare yourself to others, to compare yourself and others to him. I'm going to say that again. Christ gave you his own identity so that you would have the opportunity to compare yourself and others to him. It's not about comparing others to you. It's not about comparing others to others. It's about comparing every other person to Christ. None of them add up. We all need Christ. That's it. It's that simple. Prophet for 50 years versus meth addict for 50 years who doesn't love the Lord, does satanic rituals in their bathroom and basement and all this. Compare them to Christ, they both need help. And neither one of them look clean. They need Christ. It's not about how each of us compare to each other. It's about how we compare to him and how we can stir one another up toward who he is and to good works. Romans 12:3 says, "For by grace given to me, I say to everyone among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think with sober judgment." Again, the Prowler, what does he want to do? He wants to thwart your sober judgment and your sound mind. The sober judgment will put you in comparison. If your sober judgment is off, you begin comparing people. When your sober judgment is on the right way, you begin comparing people to Christ and seeing everybody needs help. And you're no different. Each according to the measure of faith God has assigned. I think this is the first time that I've ever looked at this verse and seen this measure of faith as a person and not as a thing. When I read it this time, I say, "For by grace given to me, I say to everyone among you not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think with sober judgment, each according to Christ, which God has assigned to the church." God gave us Christ. He's the author and perfecter of our faith. And in some sense here, I'm looking at this going, if I'm going to have sober judgment about who's who in the kingdom, I just need to compare everyone to Christ and see, hey, whoa, Christ is perfect. That should be my measure of faith. My measure of faith comes from him. Faith comes by hearing, hearing by the word. He is the word. So he must be my measure of faith. And I think that's a good word. Faith is what Satan is afraid of, because faith is what removes the mountains of his influence and culture. When the Lord speaks and we hear it and we move at his word, Satan's got to get afraid. He's got to change his plan. He's got to set up new devices and wiles and plans. Faith is what he's afraid of, because faith is what removes the mountains of his influence and culture. We've not been given a spirit of fear. Just looking at sound mind, looking at Sophronis Moss a little bit. We've not been given a spirit of fear. Some translations say timidity, but it's also fearfulness or dread. I looked up the definition for the word dread. It means to anticipate with great apprehension or fear. Key word here, anticipate. To anticipate with great apprehension or fear. The enemy is after your expectancy. He's after your expectancy. Why? Why? How about all these verses? Let's look. Isaiah 40:31. But they who wait, that word wait is expectancy. Those who have great expectancy for the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. Psalm 62:5. For God alone, O my soul, wait in silence. Expect in silence. For my hope is from him. Notice, he says for God alone. Not that his expectancy is in more than one, but it's in God alone. Psalm 27:14. Wait for the Lord. Be expectant upon the Lord. Be strong and let your heart take courage. Again, wait for the Lord. Be expectant upon the Lord. Matthew 10:28. And do not fear those who kill the body, but can't kill the soul. Rather, fear him who can destroy both the soul and the body in hell. So who do we have our focus on? And then Lamentations 3:26. It is good that one should wait quietly for the salvation of the Lord. That's talking about expecting in silence. If you compare that Lamentations 3:26 to the Psalm 62:5, second verse from the top, both of them represent this idea of quietness and silence in your waiting. It's pretty interesting there. Isaiah 41:10, fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I'll strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous hand. So be expectant on God to move. The word for expect, the word for wait there, it's kavah. This is pulled from Isaiah 40:31. It means to wait, to look for, to hope, to expect. I like this definition down here, to lie in wait for. How many of you are lying in wait for what the enemy might do next, instead of lying in wait for what the Lord might do next? How many people in the world, how many people in the church do you think are lying in wait for what the enemy is going to do, instead of lying in wait for what God is going to do? The prowler is always present. So at some point, you just got to get used to, there's a lion over there. He never has attacked. All he does is threaten. All he does is accuse. All he does is look at me and show me his teeth. But I gave up on being worried about that stupid lion years ago. And now I don't pay any attention to him. Because the moment I pay attention to him, it makes it hard for me to wait on the Lord. How can we set our minds on things above? How can we seek first the kingdom and his righteousness? How can we wait upon the Lord if all we're really thinking about is what the enemy's up to, what he's prowling around about? The answer is you can't. You can't set your mind on the things above. You can't seek first the kingdom, and you can't wait upon the Lord the way that you should, the way that God's called us to, if all you're really thinking about is what the enemy is up to and what he's prowling around about. A double-minded man is wretched in all of his ways. Don't be double-minded. Don't have, well, I got to keep my eye on that enemy on one side, and then on the other side, well, I got to keep my eye on God. It's one or the other. It's not double. It's not both. In this case, because if we begin to set our minds on what that prowler might be up to, he's going to keep us distracted. He's going to pull that sober judgment. He's going to take the power of a sound mind and crush it by your hands, not even by his own. So this is the prowler. This is how he works. And I hope this has been helpful. I hope it is something you can take and run with, not only for your own life, but to teach others about, to help others get freedom from the prowler. So thanks for joining me. Love you. Talk to you soon.